Hello and welcome to episode 3 of PLAYCast, the gaming podcast from the award-winning team at Jump Cut Online. Today we're talking about comic book and specifically comic book games. With the release of Marvel's Avengers last week, I thought it was a good time to dip into the genre, see its successes, its pitfalls, and maybe its future. Before we do that, I have a very special guest that I've been trying to get onto a podcast for eternity, and now the horizon has finally come. Rob, how are you doing?
I'm good, Sam. Thank you very much. That was a very well-spoken introduction. I feel honoured, mate. I feel honoured.
This has been trying to happen for like the longest time.
Yeah, man. We met through YouTube, 2 years ago now? 2.5 years ago now?
Longer than that, 2016.
Was it 16?
Yeah.
No way, man.
Just before Batman vs Superman came out.
Oh, yeah, of course. When you saw it 13 times?
Yeah, 13 times.
The birth of a legend, that was.
I remember because I don't know how we found each other's YouTubes, but we were both posting like DC content at the time, and I think you shot me like an email.
Yeah, I think so.
About doing a collab or something, and it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, and then slid in the WhatsApp DMs, and the rest is history, man.
Exactly. I can't believe it's been that long, like when you think about it.
No, it's crazy, man. It's cool though, man. It's been a unique friendship, hasn't it, in a way?
It has.
And shout out John, obviously, who's not here tonight.
I know.
But
I wish our special John was here today, but he's with us in spirit. Whatever you're doing, I don't know. What is he doing? Do we know?
I think he's just house decorating, dude. Like, obviously,
Decorating.
He's midway through, isn't he? So we've both got it to look forward to, but he's firmly in the thick of it, man.
We love you, John. We'll get you on the next one.
100%. 100%.
But before we jump into today's topic, like I said before we started recording, today we had a bit of news about the next generation of consoles with the Xbox price. What are you thinking about this? Because I still think I'm going to go with Sony, but I am very, very surprised that it's that cheap for the like entry-level model.
Is it $299 or $250?
$250.
See, $250 is dirt cheap, especially with there's been a drive towards digital lately anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's not even a disadvantage, I don't think, to have a digital-only console anymore. So
no, I don't think all.
$250 is crazy low. I kind of miss physical media. I kind of miss the fact that of the games to my left now, if I wanted to, I could just pass the disc to a mate. But they might have some feature in there. You know, I think like PS has SharePlay, right? So they might be able to work around that anyway. $250 is tempting, man. And it's good news for me because I will stick with Sony. And I'm thinking, yeah, go on, price war. You lot price war and let me reap the benefits, you know?
That's the thing. Apparently tomorrow, the rumour is Sony are going to reveal some of their prices because I think they've got like an anniversary event or something going on tomorrow. So I think we might see what happens.
Right, okay. I don't know if they can do it that cheap, man.
I'm curious. I'm thinking, are they in their offices right now, like celebrating because like their prices are good, or are they worried?
Yeah, because if thinking back to the reveal event, it's the same size and shape and the same performance, right? The digital only PS5.
I'm not sure actually. I don't think we know the full specs of it. I know with this Xbox, this lower tier one, it's not quite the full resolution and whatnot. It's 2K resolution, I think, something like that, and then it's at 120 frames per second, and I think it's got like 512 gigabyte SSD inside it as well.
120 frames per second, ain't bad though, man. Like,
I know, for a console as well.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's obviously I do wonder if they're going to have any sticking problems with that. Can they consistently push out 120, or is that going to be peak performance at?
Yeah, I think that'll be the caveat with some games. I'm curious to see whether it will actually maintain that. But with the PS5, the digital-only model of that, I am curious to see what the specs will be like, because I know that the full tier versions of both consoles are very, very similar on paper.
Yeah, definitely. I'm such a loyalist though. Like, I've had a PlayStation since PlayStation.
Yeah, me too.
You know, all the way back, and I remember Xbox 360 was probably king, weren't it, in comparison to PS3. Like, everyone when I was in school had 360. And therefore there was no one to play with on PS3. And that's sort of changed now, and I'm kind of like, yeah, that's what you get. Like, I won the consistency war. So now I'm thinking like, oh, don't let Xbox get it again. But do you know what? Like with the Marvel DC thing we spoke about before, I don't mess with the competition, man. Buy a console, play it, enjoy it,
Yeah.
live your life, sort of thing. I'm just pumped for the Horizon sequel, man. That's the first one I
I
want.
know you were mentioning that when they had the reveal a couple of weeks. I've not played the first one.
Oh, dude, come on, you're better than that. You're so much better.
Is it really that good?
It's legit, man. It's legit. It's got the perfect balance of putting a story together, but also making the gameplay sing as well.
Yeah.
Like it's not the sort of game where you finish it and you go, story was great, but I'd improve this, this, and this. It's like, yeah, the story was good and the controls were playable and it was the right level of difficulty and things like that. It gave me the same sort of vibe as The Last of Us did when I finished that. I finished that and I was like, yeah, man, that was a good game.
Have you played the Last of Us 2 yet? I haven't personally, but I know a lot of folks that have.
I haven't, man, but I have read the plot. I'll be honest. I saw too many negative reviews about the story. And obviously, dude, as you'll know, I'm buying a house, man. I can't afford to just drop 50, 60 quid on a game, whatever I want now.
Games are expensive,
Yeah.
Unfortunately. It's not like the days of going into Game Station and getting 5 for 20 on PS2 games.
Yeah, it's gone, man. We're in different times. And so I did look it up and I read it and I don't think I didn't read it and go, oh my God, the reviews were spot on. I did read it and go, okay, it's not great. And I've sort of left it. I will get it. I'll pick it up when it's cheap. I mean, I didn't get The Last of Us until it was like 15 quid. And I think that was for the Game of the Year edition or whatever bonus edition it was. So I will get it. But there's a couple of others in the pipeline, namely PS5 and God of War 2, hopefully. That's the one I need.
Yeah, I can see that being something that comes in the future. I'm hoping a Tsushima sequel comes as well, because that game is unreal.
Yeah, not played it, man, but I've been seeing. I remember you throwing some screenshots in, and I was shook, man. I didn't know if I was looking at real life. I didn't know if you'd been teleported to feudal Japan. I didn't really know what was going on, but that game looks beautiful, man. What's it play like?
You know what? I'm really, really impressed by it because it has a fast travel mechanic on it, and it's literally that fast you can't even get a drink in between it.
So it's not retro Skyrim.
No, not retro Skyrim. It runs really well. I'm really surprised, like with it being kind of like the swan song of the PS4, just how well it runs. Like it really uses all of the console's power.
That's good, man. I think there's been I know I'll say we're briefly on topic, so we'll go with it. I think there's been a real drive towards making video games more like art pieces in the last couple of years. Because I think about God of War is like the one that I've got reference on. The fact that that's a no-cut camera from the start of the game to the end, I find it incredible that they've even managed to do that. You know, I think back to old school. You know, I think back to God of War 2 on the PlayStation 2, where there's a camera cut every 10 steps and your joystick flicks to a different direction every time the screen changes. And, you know, they've gone to a no-cut camera and they've somehow managed to do it with different world environments, and they've managed to do it in boss battles and various other things. And a friend of mine said that he played it and his partner watched it like a movie. And he said there was impetus for him not to die because it broke the immersion for her. And it's sort of like, you know, games are just getting prettier and prettier, aren't they? And they're getting more and more immersive. But I think maybe that's just because me and you have been around for the boom of it. Like we've gone from Crash Bandicoot 1 to Tsushima, right? That's a big difference. It's a big difference.
It's funny because in the first episode of this podcast we did talk a bit about is it a good or a bad thing that games are becoming more cinematic, and where do you kind of draw the line? But like you've just been saying, we God of War having no cuts. I think there's definitely merit to developers using kind of cinematic techniques to tell stories.
Ah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And then you got the converse, I think, which is like The Witcher 3. I don't know if you've played that. You sunk any hours into that?
I've not played it, but Reese from Jump Cut absolutely sings that game's praises.
Yeah, it's huge, man. Like that's one where I think, depending on how much you love a big fantasy world, like if you love Lord of the Rings and you loved Game of Thrones, not the TV show because that was dead, but the books, then you will love The Witcher because it's such a big immersive world. But the first time I played it, I didn't really care that much about the world. It was the sort of game and the RPG elements that suckered me in, and I can easily see why people, I think Henry Cavill himself's done like 300 hours in it.
Christ.
Yeah, he's legit, man. He loves the hell out of that game, and maybe that's why he got the part. So
they've just announced, actually, it's funny you mentioned The Witcher. They announced the other day that that's getting a free upgrade if you own it to the PS5.
The Witcher 3 is?
So you will be able to get a copy of it. Yeah, The
The
Witcher 3 is getting
3's
a free upgrade.
Yes.
So they're gonna, I think it's called like an enhanced edition. So obviously it'll all be redone with like better frame rates and new like lighting and graphics and whatnot.
Okay, they're not about to pull a Bethesda though, are they? And release the same
I hope
game
not.
9 times in a row.
But I won't be surprised because we've got like Grand Theft Auto 5 being ported to the PS5 as well.
That's one thing I got issues with, man, with the gaming industry, because I feel like we've seen so many good IPs over the last couple of years.
Yeah,
we don't need to be beating franchises into the ground. But we'll wait.
There's definitely an argument there. I mean, I think it's very likely we will see another Skyrim port on the PS5.
Dude, no, man. Like, just drop Elder Scrolls 6 instead, because we know they're working on it, right? They announced
they've
that
said
video.
They're working on it, but
no, they dropped that video, didn't they? That like 20
I don't know.
second.
I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah, like 4 years ago or something crazy. Like a 20-second, like literally clip of the Elsewhere. No, it's not Elsewhere. Of the Cyrodiil or whatever it is landscape. Okay, that's not the name. Tamriel, that's the one. And we've heard nothing since then. They were like, yeah, we're doing something, and we're not going to talk about it for years. So,
well, that's a good segue because it really reminds me of the game that we're going to be talking about. I know we both haven't played it at the moment, but this Avengers game that's just come out, I feel like it's just kind of dropped with like no hype or anything behind it at all.
Do you know what?
So weird.
I remember seeing the trailer and being well excited, and then I remember seeing the first, because for those listeners who don't know me, I am the most massive comic nerd that I personally know. I'm proper up to date with everything, and
It's true. I can validate this.
I was so hyped for an Avengers game, and then I saw the first gameplay, and I was like, okay, they're a couple of years off, they got time. And then I didn't play the beta, but then I saw gameplay footage, and I was like, man, it still needs work. And I've read the plot, I've done the unthinkable, and I've got to say, the story's good. The story reads well, and I'm sure when you play it, it's an even better experience than reading it on a Wikipedia article, right? But yeah. I think you're perfectly right. I think they've suffered from the fact that there's no Marvel content coming out anywhere else at the minute. Like, we were meant to have Falcon and Winter Soldier. That's gone. We were meant to have WandaVision in, 2 months? That's gone. Black Widow was meant to have come out. Disappeared. I mean, Eternals was originally staged for November this year. And that's gone. So I don't know if they've
been pushed.
Oh, Eternals is gone. I think that's getting
I thought that was
pushed
still
again.
coming out at the end of the year. I didn't realise it'd been pushed.
Well, we haven't even seen a trailer yet. And
it's very true.
I see that one getting pushed even further back. I think they're just going to basically do a 12-month slide of everything.
Yeah. I saw a Black Widow trailer in the cinema the other day, and it said only in cinemas, so I presume it's still coming out at some point this year.
Yeah, I think they'll Mulan it, to be honest.
Disney Plus it.
Yeah, I think they'll do a charge extra on Disney Plus.
I would be very surprised if they did that, especially with like an MCU like film, a big film, because we expect these films now to make like billions of dollars. So I would be very, very surprised if they did that.
Of course, but I think, well, you make a good point, because Mulan, I think, is suffering even more than they thought. Actually, I think they sort of predicted that it would slump a bit being on Disney Plus, and it's done even worse. So so maybe they won't follow mode. But yeah, it's sort of linking back to what you said. I think the Avengers game has suffered from a lot of hype when it was first announced, because it was announced 5 years ago. I think
it was a while ago when it was announced, and like I say, I just feel like in the run up to it, it hasn't had that big push that you would expect, especially from like a Marvel IP.
Yeah. I think one thing they could have definitely done more was the fact that, Marvel play a lot on the diversity card, and they are making sure that their roster of characters is diverse and it is representative. I really don't think there was enough push to show the general audience who Kamala Khan is, because she's the lead, she's the main character. And
I agree on that. I don't think the marketing's been very reflective on showing her as the main character. I think they've been trying to kind of disguise it with the kind of team element rather than this kind of singular story.
And it makes no sense, right? Because she's like one of the best-selling comic characters that have debuted in the last 10 years. Like, people absolutely adore her run, and I can see why. Like, I've read a good bit of it, and it is an incredible story. And you'd think that surely they should be pushing that angle a bit more, because we've seen Captain America before, and we've seen Iron Man, and we've seen Thor, and we've spoke personally a little bit about superhero fatigue. And I think people they are starting to get bored of the same heroes, and you've dropped an Avengers team, 5 of which people have seen for the last 10, 12 years, 1 of which is new, and you haven't really pushed that one for anyone who doesn't get the game. And I think that's a bit disappointing, because they're now talking about they're going to introduce more and more characters, and the only ones we've seen mentioned so far are other MCU characters. It would have been nice to see some characters who haven't debuted in films yet coming in as part of what is meant to be a team game separate to the MCU, not just an MCU light sort of universe.
Yeah. So for the people at home, because I'll admit I don't really know that much about Kamala Khan. What's her deal then? What's her kind of backstory in a nutshell? If you had to elevate a picture.
Okay, so elevate a picture. So she is I'm sure people will correct me if I'm wrong, but she's a Pakistani descent American girl, and her whole thing is that she fan fictions the Avengers, and Carol Danvers is her idol, and she enters these competitions, and she puts it onto websites, and people read it and they fangirl over it and they fanboy over it, and then she becomes an Inhuman. So she's affected by Terrigenesis, and she gets these powers that she calls it embiggening, and it's similar to Reed Richards' stretching. She can sort of make herself bigger, she can make herself smaller. There is a more stricter definition to it, but her whole thing is that she's always been a very character-driven reflection of American society as well. And I think, especially with what we're seeing going on at the minute with the Black Lives Matter movement and the problems with racism in America, I think she's sold well because it's a very personal story for a lot of people. On top of that, you've got the fact that it's a young female superhero of colour, and one who is actually remarkably quite funny. She has excuse me, she has heart. She is a very interesting character to read, and she's been in the Champions and she was briefly in the Avengers, and I think at the minute she's very much doing her own thing, and that's nice because the character gets to develop sort of in the bubble that she originally was in, fan fiction in the Avengers, and there's some great moments where she very much still fangirls Captain Marvel when she's around, which it's quite cool to see that these superheroes sort of have levels of respect even in their communities. And the only way I can describe it is she's just a really interesting character. We don't really see characters like her that often, so to get one, and like I say, for her to be probably the main character and not be pushed it's a bit of a shame, man. It is a shame.
What I would say, going off of that then, with what you've described kind of about of a descent and how she's kind of a reflection of like the world today, how do you think, I know we haven't played it, but how do you think they're going to try and translate that within the game? Because obviously it's an odd game model to try and pick that kind of storyline to portray, because it's kind of like a hybrid of the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games with like the Destiny 2 kind of model. So how do you think they can kind of portray that in a good light?
I think they... Obviously, I've not played the game, right? So this is just from reading it. I think the way they're going to do it when they introduce new characters is that they will come with a small story arc as well.
Right.
so that they will introduce new characters, and that will sort of they will have a slight story to go alongside it. What I would like to see is as more characters get involved, because like Kate Bishop, Hawkeye is confirmed, and it would be really cool if the young female Hawkeye could link up with the young character who effectively has just joined the Avengers, right? And that they could have some sort of team or some link there. I couldn't even second guess a direction, if I'm honest, because having read the plot, I didn't see it going that way, which you'll know I'm quite a fan of, because especially for the first, sort of 7 or 8 MCU movies, I could pretty much guess the plot by the time I'd seen the cast list, right? So it was reading it. It was quite nice for me. That's quite fresh.
Yeah.
So I think they're just going to drop sort of new story episodes would probably be the best thing. I know Hawkeye's confirmed. I know Ant-Man's confirmed. Black Panther is coming, but I think they've said they're going to delay that.
So this is all kind of like post-game content then that they'll be kind of adding in.
Exactly, and it's free as far as I'm aware. So I think what they've done is they've put microtransactions in, the dreaded micro, but it's only cosmetic. So they're letting the story and the characters come in for free, but then the cosmetics are at cost. So it's similar to Fortnite in a way. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Fortnite as well, because that's had like a big Marvel rehaul recently.
Yeah, I'm on it, dude. I'm on it.
Are you on it?
I'm on it. I had to do it.
We'll come back to that, because I've got... But with you mentioning kind of Kate Bishop as well, I think having younger like Avengers interact with each other is kind of mirroring some of the stuff we've seen in the MCU as well, specifically with Peter Parker. Because what I really like with Peter Parker in the MCU, he kind of rejects the Avengers initiative. He just wants to do his own thing. It's only really when he's called into kind of serious moments of danger, like with the Endgame kind of storyline, that he's sprung into that team. But I think when you're mentioning that Kate Bishop kind of meeting Kamala Khan, I like that they're taking that kind of innocence of kind of youth out with some of the characters. I think that's a...
Yeah, and that's a very classic sort of Avengers response. Like, I think for people who don't read comics, the MCU is quite a tilted view of it, because oftentimes these heroes are off doing their own thing. Like, while Iron Man's in New Avengers, he's also in a solo book, right? While Beast is in an Avengers book, he's also doing stuff in the X-Men book. So they very much have their own separate superhero lives outside of these team-up things. So the Peter Parker model in the MCU has been quite nice, because we've actively seen him say, no, I want to be the neighborhood Spider-Man, and then just answer the call as and when he's needed, which I think is a really, really cool way of doing it. They're doing it sort of retroactively with Black Widow, aren't they?
Yeah, it looks that way.
In between, I think that's being set in between Winter Soldier and Civil War.
I think so. I don't know if I read somewhere it was after Civil War but pre-Infinity War. I don't know, but I think it'd make more sense if it was after Winter Soldier and before Civil War, personally.
It's in one of those two slots. And I quite like that, because it gives you that sense of world building almost a little bit more. And like you say, with the younger heroes, it gives you an excuse to not have them constantly going against these cosmic world-ending threats. It's quite nice that Spider-Man was effectively just fighting a master thief in his first movie, and that he was just sort of fighting an illusionist who wanted a load of money at one point during the second one. It's quite nice. I wish they wouldn't make them all ex-Stark haters. That's one gripe I've got. But Peter Parker's coming to the Avengers game at some point. Sony exclusive.
Yeah, I'm curious to see all that go down, because I think they've confirmed it's not part of the Insomniac Spider-Man universe. So I'm curious to see how Peter Parker's portrayed there and what his kind of deal is. Whether they'll go with a new take, whether he's got like Parker Industries and stuff like that, or whether it'll be a younger Spider-Man, kind of again like reflecting what we've seen in the MCU. The costume as well is something I'll be curious to see as well.
What's the suit going to look like? Yeah, definitely. Because I remember, I guess this is as good a segue as any to the Spider-Man game. I remember you weren't a fan of that original game suit.
No, I really wasn't. Are you talking about the white symbol one. Yeah.
Yeah, the red and blue
Really
with the
wasn't a
big
fan of
white
it when it
symbol
came.
on the front.
I've grown to like it since, but I don't know. It didn't sit well with me when I first saw it.
Yeah, I sort of get it, but I grew to excuse it. I think is probably the right thing to say because that game was just, dude, it was fantastic, man. And you could change, you could change
was tons
suit
of
after
suits
like
to
20
choose from.
minutes if you wanted to. Yeah, which was it was dope. I think the sequel for that when it comes is going to be huge. I think whether that's, I don't quite know what the deal is with this Miles Morales game that they've announced for PS5. I don't know if it's an addition to Spider-Man. I don't know if it's like a Spider-Man 1.5. I don't know if it's the beginning
I've read
of Spider-Man
that
2.
it's a standalone game, kind of similar to Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. Have you played that? So it's not like it's kind of like a full game in a way, but it doesn't have kind of like the scope and scale of like kind of like a main series game, if you will. So it is its own entity. I don't know whether it'll have the same kind of length and whatnot. I can't imagine it would do, but it is going to be its own thing. And I think as well, if you buy that and you own Spider-Man, you get an upgrade of Spider-Man for the PS5 as well.
Okay, so that's a pretty cool way of doing it. I'll definitely be getting it. That game was dope, and the characterization of Miles was off the chain as well. Dude, I could gush about that game forever, man. That was like spot on, borderline perfect comic book game. And that's on the record now. I've said it. It's done. It's it just everything was right with it. One thing that will always stand out to me is the web swinging. That's got to be something that is so difficult to get right. To get the fluidity of
the weight
Spider-Man
of his body
right.
as well, traversing through the air, all the different kind of variables,
and making it easy to do from a controls point of view, as well. It's effectively one button, right? One or two buttons, and that is impressive that they've sort of managed to code the game that you can feel like Spider-Man pressing one button. I think that's awesome. And then the fighting's borrowed a lot from another set of games, which I'm sure we'll talk about soon. But the fighting was great. The story was awesome. I don't know if we can drop spoilers.
The game's been out 2 years now. I think we can drop some spoilers.
Yeah, obviously the death of Aunt May at the end is one of the best creative decisions I think they could have made, because that completely changes Peter Parker as a character. Like the death of Gwen Stacy did in Amazing Spider-Man 2 with Garfield, and like it did in the comics, it sort of completely flips that character's world on the head. So it means that they can take their Peter Parker, especially with him being in a sort of mentorship role to Miles as well. They can take it in whatever direction they want, and I'm excited.
Me too.
For it,
I think, like, again, with us talking about Spider-Man, and this is obviously one of the big successes of this kind of genre, and how it's translated into gaming. What I liked about what Insomniac did with Spider-Man, they really translated that kind of, it's the cliche thing to say about the character, but the kind of everyday aspect of him. Like, you literally like open up in his flat and he's already got bills everywhere. He's struggling to make ends meet, and then he's kind of like got prospects. Like, I'm sure there's like a card from like Reed Richards attached to his notice board or something. I like that he's already kind of existing in this universe for quite a while, and we're just kind of picking up with him.
Yeah, I loved that it opened with him just straight up going after Kingpin, who's like historically one of Spider-Man's more difficult foes to nail down because of Kingpin's connections to, he's got lawyers and he's got people that take the fall for him. It was awesome to see him just rock in there, kick the shit out of him, and then just, job done. And it, like you say, it was just well grounded in the Marvel universe while remaining a Spider-Man story. And I think the photo system in it, the photo challenges were great. The fact that you could swing by Doctor Strange's place and you can swing by the Wakandan embassy, and I think Avengers Tower is in it.
Yeah, Avengers Tower is in it. I've took many a photo on top of it.
Yeah, you can swing by Avengers Tower. I think it just adds, like we said before about world building, it just elevates it to that little higher of a level that makes a great game an excellent game. And a lot of these things aren't, they aren't gameplay things. Doctor Strange's house, the Wakandan Embassy, Avengers Tower being in, they're not gameplay things. They're creative decisions that are made that say, do you know what, we could have generic buildings, or we could chuck these in as a bit of fan service. And I think those sort of fan service moments are what really, like, if you've took many photos on top of Avengers Tower, then that gives you the answer, doesn't it? It was a good thing to include. That's the thing
with Spider-Man as well. I'm sure some other games will mention. You can definitely feel like the passion and like bubbling from the creative team that have gone into this game. You can feel that they obviously love this source material, and they're just pouring their heart into it.
And it brings passion out in the fans, right? Like, the fact that we're doing this right now is evidence of that. But, you've got people who... I remember seeing on Reddit, some guy did a full-ass tour. He did, like, a Marvel tour of New York within the Spider-Man game. And he, like, presented it as, like, here is a picture of Spider-Man at Avengers Tower. Here is a picture of him at... I think the Baxter Building might be in there as well. And it's just, like, it's just a great way of keeping the fans happy while also making a great game. Great DLC as well.
It does.
I will say about Spider-Man.
Really good value as well. I remember when the game came out, I think you could buy or pre-buy like the all free DLCs for it for like £15, which is like crazy value for money for like 6 hours per DLC.
Yeah, because and the nice thing was that they set things up for a future game, but they didn't leave you on a cliffhanger. Like it was well contained stories that also teased a little bit of here you go, this is coming, while at the same time finishing up the story. And I mean, the Black Cat design was awesome. The Black Cat design was off the chain, and actually making Silver Sable an interesting character was pretty cool. She's a character that I've never really been a fan of, apart from in there.
I've seen bits of her kind of in like the 90s animated show, which I know we both absolutely love. And she's featured a little bit in have you watched the 2003 animated show with Neil Patrick Harris as the voice of Spider-Man?
I've seen
it's like kind of like a shell
but nothing
shaded kind of style, like 3D modeling. It's really cool.
Yeah, I remember it briefly. I did watch it, but dude, I've got so much nostalgia for that OG one. I still watch it now.
Me too.
Like Disney Plus has helped me out hardcore on that.
It's odd actually, just like touching on the one I've just mentioned, because Michael Clark Duncan actually reprises his role as Kingpin from the Daredevil universe in that show, which I think is really cool.
Oh man, we've watched that movie together.
We watched the director's cut together.
Yeah, man, that's
with
hard
the
work.
Coolio subplot.
Yeah, that was hard work, man. I don't know. Was that your choice of film?
It
that
might
week?
have been. I can't remember. I think
Yeah,
it was actually.
dude, I don't know if I forgive you for that yet. I don't know if I forgive you for that yet.
I don't think it's that bad. I've got a bit of a soft spot for Daredevil.
It was that one bit of CGI, man. It was the Daredevil jumping off a skyscraper and being
jumping
fine.
about
Proper
70 feet and landing
landing
on the window cleaner thing and not breaking his legs.
Yeah. That was a proper superhero landing moment. That was.
It's funny because they were making a game of that movie at one point, and it was going to be like an open world kind of thing similar to Spider-Man 2, and then it got shelved. But there is gameplay of it on YouTube that you can look at.
Spider-Man 2. Again, there's a game.
What is it with Spider-Man and just having like success within like games? What is it that translates so well about that character? I mean, obviously you've got, like we've said, like the character point of view and how you can tell that in a story, but there's just something magic about bringing Spider-Man into a game that just works.
Do you think it's because he's such a popular
I think that's
culture
definitely
icon?
part of it. I mean, I think you could say the same as well about the Arkham franchise as well, which you touched upon briefly.
Yeah, I think like that. My two brothers don't know comics from Adam, but they know Spider-Man, and they knew Spider-Man before the MCU was even a thing. And I think he's just a character that's just got immense star power. And I think part of that is actually to do with the OG Tobey Maguire. I think so many people
Yeah.
saw those movies and were just blown away by what they
Yeah,
did.
I can
You know,
remember now when that came out, and there was an advert, something on the news actually about how it was like one of the first 12A movies in the UK. And at the time I was really young, so I couldn't go
hmm
watch it. But I remember when it came out on VHS, and it was on a red VHS. And my mum brought it home, and I thought
yes,
this is the hypest shit ever.
yeah, dude. And do you know what? I just think there is, and maybe it's because it's quite. If you strip the character back to its absolute basics, it's quite an endearing story. You know, it's this sort of on his arse kid who's not really got much going for him other
Yeah.
than his intelligence. All of a sudden, his whole world is flipped on its head because he is New York's sweetheart out of nowhere. He's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, yet at the same time, he has to still be Peter Parker. And I think a lot of people sort of they value that story because everybody dreams of being a
Yeah.
bit more than they are. But it also shows you like the negatives of trying to be too much of a hero, and it shows you the negatives of trying to do more than one person can handle, while at the same time, you know, you always root for the hero, don't you? And so I think Spider-Man is just, I think they will always
Yeah.
succeed with Spider-Man games.
Well,
I think
it's
they'll
like you've
always
just said
sell,
there
to be
about
honest.
kind of the endearing quality of the character and the morality of it as well. I think that's an aspect that a lot of people love from the games, because it's that feeling that is used with all superhero games. You feel like the hero, and I think with Spider-Man specifically, you do have that kind of moral feeling of doing good, and you have that very strongly when you're doing your little side missions in Spider-Man 2, whether it's like helping a kid find his balloon that's gone missing in the air, or
Yeah,
you're
man.
delivering pizzas, or even in the newer game where you're just doing kind of like random like robbery, stopping people robbing stores, and the fact that you can interact with like the civilians in like kind of a limited manner, like you can say hello to them and take selfies with them and stuff.
Dish out a
Yeah,
high
I think that
five.
quality of
Yeah,
the character again is another aspect that translates well to audience, because, like you say, everybody wants to be a bit better than they are, and when you're given the opportunity to do that in the kind of escapism of a video game, it you set up for success basically.
yeah, absolutely, man. And I think one thing that I think you've just hit the nail on the head. Video games
Yeah.
are escapist, aren't they? Movies are, comics are, books are, and it's just to take away from the daily grind. And I don't think people want too real of a story. You know, there's a time and a place for gritty comic books, and there's a time and a place for very real or real adaptations
Yeah.
of comic material. And it can definitely be done well. It can absolutely be done well. But I think a lot of times, especially your casual viewer, you know, people who aren't students of cinema like you are and aren't absolute comic nuts like I am, I think they just want something that is very light-hearted and is very sort of escapist, where they can just sit down and they can watch a guy who was bitten by a spider swing from buildings and fight a guy in a suit who's called the Green Goblin. And as long as it's a well-packaged story, same as in a video game, as long as it's a well-packaged story, people will eat up the content forever, because it gives them their half an hour, whatever it is a day, escape from their normal lives. And I think that's ultimately what makes comic-related media so great, is that it gives people a jump into this crazy world that makes no sense, right? But it's allowed to not make any sense, and it's your world for as long as you're in that piece of media. So I will argue for it forever, man.
I think, like we've said, Spider-Man's kind of, I would say, other than Batman, like the pinnacle of kind of success within this kind of genre for games. But I certainly think there's been some dreadful attempts over the years.
Oh,
I mean, what comes to mind when I say that to you?
Worst comic book game of
Go
all
on.
time.
Well, not necessarily worst, but just bad ones or ones you haven't really enjoyed.
Dude,
I'll
you might have to go
first.
first, man. I got to think about this. Yeah, go for it. Go on.
I know we've just talked about Spider-Man again, but the Spider-Man 3 port for the PS2 was pretty bad.
I never played
it. Just
it.
felt
I
really
never played it.
lazy and shoddy. You could tell it wasn't like Spider-Man 2, where they clearly had a lot of time to kind of dig deep and kind of innovate the genre in the way like they do with Spider-Man 2. It just felt like they were trying to kind of recapture that success just by having an open world and whatnot. It didn't feel the same. What else have I played? Go on.
Do you know what I would say? The Hulk game. I can't quite remember which one it was.
If you're about to talk smack about Ultimate Destruction, I'm going to have to throw hands. But if you're talking about...
No, I don't...
If you're talking about the PS3 one, I know the one you're on about.
Yeah, I think it was the PS3 one. Help me out. It was repetitive gameplay and just a dreadful, completely unmemorable story.
I've barely played it, but I remember it. I remember that, and I remember the Thor game for the first movie. I think it was called like Thor, God and Thunder or something like that.
Didn't play
it started off promising. You're fighting I forget the name of the realm now. Where they go with where did they go in the first movie? And it's all like ice people and shit. That's the one.
Jotunheim.
Yeah, you start off on there, and you're in the middle of like the kind of war and fight that you do in the movie, and it's fun. But then from there, it's a shambles. It's trying to be this fun platformer, but it's just because everything's so kind of mushed together with it just doesn't work.
I'm always cautious of movie
that's
games.
the thing as well. Like,
and
I think before we had kind of full-fledged superhero games that existed on their own, most of them were tie-in games.
Yeah, and I think they've always struggled. Whereas when a company sets out to make a game featuring a character, they've got an idea. They're not stealing an idea from a movie. And I think the biggest challenge that people face when making anything comic related is you've got to have a good team of writers. Like, perfect example are the Arkham games. And if you don't mind just jumping onto that, they, as a story, they are just incredibly well written. The characters are well balanced from the media. Batman is complex, and I know we've spoken about this personally. Batman is one of the hardest characters to write because it just depends on where you take your inspiration from and what you decide you're going to study and what you're going to do sort of a character study on. And they've just got it spot on. And I mean, Kevin Conroy can voice that character forever. I don't care. He could do it for as long as he wants, man. And they just had everything well wrapped up. And I mean, I know there's two different studios worked on it. You probably know the studios.
Yeah, you got Rocksteady,
Montreal did
the
Origins
main series, if you will, and then like you said, Warner Bros. Montreal that have done Origins.
Yeah, and both done an incredible job, in my opinion. I got some issues with some of the gameplay in Night.
It's funny because in like both episodes so far of this podcast, we've mentioned Arkham Knight and the kind of shitty aspects of that game, just like randomly.
Give me my goddamn Deathstroke fight. I don't want to fight him in a tank, right? I want a 1v1 straightener in the middle of Gotham.
What, you're saying
right?
You don't want to take down 40 of his cronies before you can fight him in a tank in the middle of Gotham City?
Nah, dude. Do you know what? I loved the tank sections. I thought they were a really interesting way. The way it was used for puzzles in some of the Riddler challenges, incredible. Great way of doing things. But I didn't need to fight that many tanks, man. Like, it was that game became long in some sections just because of the amount that was.
If you want a Deathstroke fight, you got to play Origins.
It's
that boss fight is incredible.
It's dope, man. Yeah, that boss fight is, and what I think's hilarious is it just before then where the electrocutioner comes in.
He's set up to try and fight you, and you just deck him in one punch.
and he's done like straight away. Like a great bit of writing, and I am very much in support of those Arkham games. And I think I was talking to a friend about it actually the other day. I think the big thing for me is how much you get to feel like Batman when you're in those games. Like the first stealth section of Asylum, oh dude, it's legit. When you're like skulking around on the gargoyles above and you're swooping down to take people out in an inverted takedown. And one thing they did really well in the engine was the fact that as you start picking them off silently, the other characters react to it. and they start grouping up, or they start showing fear and shooting at random things when they wouldn't before. And it just gives you that feeling of, that Batman Begins container scene is the only way I can describe it, where where you're a shadow and you're literally picking them off one by one, and there's different ways you can play it, but I like to go full stealth in the Arkham games, and then just throw the hands when I have to.
It's
really
funny you mention with the kind of stealth element, 'cause I think when people think Batman specifically to games, a lot of people may just kind of think of him as kind of the big brawler who just beats the shit out of people, and you do get that in the games. But like you said, what they've done really well across the series as a whole is capture how Batman instills fear into people. How he is the detective that uses the shadows and his environment against his opponents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Origins did the detective stuff really well. Actually, I think they were the first one to introduce like not just detective vision, but like detective mode, where you could rewind the crime scene and things
you're
like
right
that.
on that one. Origins is my favourite one actually out of all of them, which is a bit of an unpopular opinion, but that is my favourite one.
Okay, I think mine's got to be City, just because it exploded
I'd say that's
the world.
second. I remember when City
like
came out and I bought it from the HMV that's not open anymore near me, and I literally completed it in like a weekend.
Yeah, so I got so I first played Asylum at a friend's. I didn't pick up Asylum till late in, and I picked up Asylum on the cheap, like a tenner, and wished I would have bought the limited edition that had the Batarang in it. And then I bought the City limited edition, which has a little statue, and then I bought the Origins limited edition. And actually, this, and do you know what? I don't think anyone will hear this that shouldn't. I got given funding to go for an experiment, and I underspent. And I came back and I had a load of money spare, so I bought the Arkham Knight PS4. So since the first one, I've sort of stepped it up. The City trophy was only like 8 inches, and then the Origins trophy was like 15 inches, and then I just bought the PS4
I'll be
with
honest,
all the
I
branding
think
on it.
you dodged a bullet with the Arkham Asylum one, because I had that special edition. I picked it up like way down the line when it was like really cheap, and the Batarang that came with it wasn't very high quality. So I think you dodged a bullet on that one.
Yeah, but dude, you can say you've got a Batarang, and I can't, man. Do you know that's the big problem there. But no, I'm a huge fan of those Arkham games. One game I did want to mention, and we sort of briefly spoke about some of the older games. I don't know if you remember. Did you ever have a Sega Game
I
Gear?
didn't personally, but my brother did.
Yeah, we had a Batman game for the Sega Game Gear. And I remember that was, I think it tied in with the, Michelle Pfeiffer.
I've played that game. I've played that game. I know the one you're on about.
Was in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and dude, for the time,
what
a dope game, man. Like, so good.
Have you played the Batman Forever game? Because that's in a similar kind of vein, but I can't remember which version I've played now, but it's kind of like done in the style of Mortal Kombat, where it's kind of like 3D like polygon models, and then you've got like your sprite background and stuff like that. That was really cool, because I think the first level, if I remember, is like Arkham Asylum, so it's a bit similar to the supposed Schumacher cut that we haven't seen, where that starts in Arkham Asylum. So
we're talking about
that, if you can like get that hold of that somehow, it's worth playing.
I'm sure there'll be a ROM of it somewhere. And then the other retro game that I had jotted down, the X-Men arcade beat 'em up.
Ooh.
I don't know if you ever played it.
I had an X-Men game on the Game Boy called...
Was it Children of the Atom? Yeah, it's not that one that I'm talking about. So that was great. But I've got a lot of memories. So we holidayed in Pontins when I was growing up in the UK. And I've got memories of like me, my 2 brothers, and a couple of cousins crowding around the X-Men machine with like 14 quid, which got you like, I think it was 20 pence a life or 50 pence a life. So that got you a load of turns. And I think it was the last day that we were coming home, and it was raining. So there was nothing we could do, and we weren't leaving for like 4 hours. So we just crowded around this X-Men arcade cabinet, just basically told everyone else who wanted to play to do one, and just fed money into this thing. And we went through the whole thing. And I think you end up on like Avalon, which is like Magneto's floating asteroid or something crazy like that. I can't remember. I was like 8, right? But what a game! Like proper old school side-scrolling beat 'em up, and it was just the memories there. And I think nostalgia plays a big part of it, right? The memories are just absolutely incredible. There have been some amazing comic games, but like you point out, there's also been some trash.
I mean, one of the kind of trashy ones that I do actually have a soft spot for. Have you played the Batman and Robin game on the PS1?
Nah, dude.
It's pretty bad, but it's kind of endearing because it was kind of ambitious for the time. Because you have like a Batcave that's like the hub of the game that you can go back to. You can switch between Batman, Robin, and Batgirl. And you've got their vehicles available as well. So you've got the Batmobile, you've got the Robin bike, and I think Batgirl is like some variation of a bike as well. And the world is actually like you can explore it. It's open world, and you drive from the Batcave to the missions. So yeah,
See,
you
that's
drive
kind of
from
cool, man.
the first level. You drive from the Batcave to Mr. Freeze robbing the museum. And then it turns into like a traditional kind of single player platformer when you're doing the missions. The gameplay is pretty trash because it's just like hard to control, but I think the ideas that they're there are pretty cool.
I respect it. I respect it. I think that's quite good actually. Gotham Knights is one I wanted to.
I know
talk
you
about.
mentioned that earlier. You said you wanted to get into that, and like we've been saying with Batman, I think this is a good segue into that. Go on, drop it on me.
Dude, I'm so ready. Like I've been ready for this game for ages, man. So you'll know more than I do. I'm as big a fan of the Bat family as I am of Batman itself as a character. I actually think one of the more interesting parts of Batman is the fact that he effectively takes broken kids and turns them into heroes, right? And what I think is really interesting is the Bat family as a sort of entity has shown so many flaws in that, and yet they've still always got his back. And Red Hood was a great villain for Arkham Knight. It was really annoying that they made the Arkham one gripe about Arkham Knight very quickly. It was really annoying that they made the Arkham Knight design so obviously Red Hood.
We talked about this in the last podcast because I said I was annoyed with the twist that before the game came out, they said the Arkham Knight was a fresh new character, and it's like, man, this is clearly Jason Todd. Come on.
Yeah, and it's just not like they've introduced a real Arkham Knight in the comics as well, and it ended up being like an absolute no one, like Amadeus Arkham's granddaughter or something. Like it's that insignificant. I've already forgot. But Gotham Knights, man, like dude, the fact that we're gonna get to play as all 4 of the main supporting cast is awesome. I'm a bit disappointed that it looks like they've de-aged Tim Drake a little bit, because Tim Drake's Robin design in City
I was just about to say which
great.
iterations of the characters are we getting.
So I'm pretty sure I've read it's Tim Drake, and then the other giveaways he's got this like teleporting tech, and Tim's very much like the inventor. Tim's very much the tinkerer. Shout out James Tinian's run on Detective Comics, which has Tim Drake put together the team, which is dope. And then we're getting Dick Grayson Nightwing, classic Babs, and then obviously Red Hood. Now, what I think is going to be really interesting, especially with the Red Hood stuff, is it going to even loosely link to Night? Because I think it would be quite nice if it sort of linked that he was the villain of Night and then sort of comes back. And there's some good narrative options there with exploring his relationship with the other members of the team. Dude, I'm just excited to shoot the shit out of people in a Batman game, man. Like, I'm ready. Red Hood's one of my favourite characters, but
what I've heard, I'm not sure whether it's true, but apparently, because this is Warner Bros. Montreal, apparently it's not connected to Arkham Knight, but the Suicide Squad game that's coming out that's in the same universe, which I think's really odd. Because if you watch the trailer for Gotham Knight, anybody would think that this is like almost a direct continuation, because you have Bruce Wayne kind of giving that message that he's going to die, or he has died, rather. I would take it as a direct sequel, but apparently it's not, which I think's an odd creative choice.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused. Maybe there's something to do with the rights. the Suicide Squad game's interesting as well, and I had
Okay.
some questions for you on this. But the thing, just one last point on Knights, the Court of Owls are the
Oh my
perfect villain
god,
for it.
yes.
Perfect villain, perfect time, and I just think introducing a team to fight a team
Yeah.
is going to be dope. But I do think they're going to pull a fast one and introduce Batman as a playable
I
character near the
think
end
so
of the
as
game.
well. I think that's definitely a predictable element that
And
we'll get.
I'm not sure I want it though, man. Like the more I think about it, the more it would be
I know
quite
you though, and
nice
I
to
know for a
have
fact
like.
that if they introduce Batman in like a surprise moment and you get to team up with him and the Bat family, you will lose your shit.
Dude, of course I will. This
Like,
is part of who I
like,
am,
and the way
right?
they probably do it, like in my head, is like they're in some like ultimate peril, and all the teams like getting the shit kicked out of them, and then suddenly you just see his fucking boots rock up, and you pan up, and it's Batman.
Yeah, do you know what though? I'd quite like. There's an animated movie. It might be called Court of Owls. It might be called Batman and Robin. I can't remember, but it features. It's basically the Court of Owls and the lead Talon trying to groom
Yeah,
Damien to join them. And it's I think it's called Batman. Like the scene is Batman versus 1,000 Owls. And Nightwing's there as well. And but like I want that. Like I want the Bat family
yeah.
versus 1,000 Talons, and they should be far superior to the standard Talon. But I just like this idea of them feeling completely backs against the wall for a bit, because one thing we've never had in a Batman game is a sense that
Yeah,
he's going to lose,
I get that as well. Even in Arkham Knight, when you've got the
and
kind
that's
of exploration of his psyche, I do think you still know Batman's going to succeed in some way, even if it comes at a personal cost. The overall mission will be a success.
exactly. And I think when you're playing with effectively his rookies, right? Like yes, Nightwing's a superhero in his own right, and Batgirl's a genius in hers. Excuse me. When you're playing with an inexperienced team, effectively, you've got an option to explore this idea of, oh shit, they might
Yeah.
lose, and I'm excited for
I
that.
don't think they
I'm
do it,
excited for
but because of how they did the character in Arkham Knight. But I think it would be hype as hell if Bruce Wayne is dead, but then Azrael takes the mantle. That'd be pretty
I wouldn't
boss if
mind
he
it,
came in and he
I
was
would-
kind of like the new leader of the Bat family. Has that been done
I
before
would-
in the comics and in any iteration? You'll know more than me.
So Azrael's biggest thing was
Yeah.
after Nightfall, when Bane broke
Yeah,
Batman's
which
back.
is
He sort of stepped
something they
in.
didn't do in the film.
But
I
I
know
don't-
that's a big part in the book.
Yeah, and I think he was Batman
Yeah,
for
he was,
a
yeah.
good couple of issues, but ultimately was too violent, and Bruce sort of recovered. Azrael has been around as a supporting character since then, and he flipped from being a supporting character to being a minor villain to back and forth. I don't think he's ever led the team. I think the closest to leading the team has been classically Dick, because Dick was Batman
Yeah.
for quite a while, and then Tim in the recent Detective Comics run. He sort of he was less the leader. Batwoman was
Yeah.
very much the field leader, but Tim was almost like the brains behind it. He designed I think it was the Old Bailey or the Clock Tower, and he was working. This was when Clayface was part of the Bat family, which is an awesome run. I couldn't
I've
have
got a
loved
lot
that
of love
run
for Tim Drake.
anymore.
I think he's a
So-
fantastic version of Robin and Nightwing. I really like that version of him.
Yeah, I think Tim's
me
my
too.
favourite Robin. I think Tim's my favourite Robin, but I got a load of love for Red Hood, man. I've got he's my boy. Red Hood's my boy. Yeah, man. No, briefly, Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
This is what I wanted to ask you. That's going to be a
I think
shooter,
it's
right?
going to have shooter elements, much like the Avengers game we've talked about. 'Cause when you play a Black Widow rather, that's got
Black Widow.
shooter elements to it. I don't think it's a full-fledged shooter, but that in itself poses a good question. Like we said at the beginning about the future of kind of the genre. It's kind of odd that we're getting not one but two 4-player co-op DC games.
Yeah. Dude, what are your thoughts on Suicide Squad? Lay 'em on
I'm
me.
not sure because we haven't seen any full-fledged gameplay as of yet. Like that the Gotham Knights preview was quite good. I think you got quite a lot of meat with that. But with the Suicide Squad one, I'm not too sure. I just think, like I said, it's a really odd creative decision to have that set in the Arkham Knightverse and then have the Justice League introduced into it, who we've only heard in passing mentions. It's an odd way to get to. I know we know these characters like Superman and whatnot because they're massive pop culture icons and they've had movies and whatnot, but it's an odd thing to introduce them into a game where we don't know these iterations of the character. And I'm assuming that at one point in the game you will have to fight Batman, which I can imagine will be like one of the toughest fights in the game. It just has to be. But I'm really not sure about it. I think I need to see more gameplay and kind of what the approach is, because the tone as well is a lot different to the Arkham series as well. With it, but again, with it being set in the same year, it's very different. So I'm middling on it at the moment.
Dude, I don't know if I need it, man. I don't know if I need a Suicide Squad game. Like, I enjoyed the first one. I'm well excited for James Gunn's iteration. I like the team. But I don't know if I need a Suicide Squad kills the Justice League game. Maybe I'll eat my words. But I think when there's so much scope to be done with the team, the Justice League, like there's a lot to be done there. To be using the Suicide, and I think they're cashing in on the movies and Harley Quinn, right? Harley Quinn is a huge cash cow. She's massive in everything. The series is apparently amazing. I haven't caught up on it, but the series is apparently amazing. She's an incredible money spinner right now, so I get why they're doing it, but I'm just not sold on the necessity.
Reece said in last
of a
episode when we
squad
spoke about when it got announced that I think Rocksteady's kind of point of view on it is that in rather doing a Justice League game where you've got a lot of characters that have like notoriously hard to adapt into game, like Superman, how do you give him stakes when he's practically invincible? And you've got the Flash, how do you do stuff with his speed and make that A, fun in the game, and B, practical in a story sense? So I think they've kind of flipped it on its head and given it to characters that are a bit more, not necessarily acceptable, but maybe more adaptable to do. It's like... It's a comparison that's been thrown around a lot, but it's like with Guardians of the Galaxy. You've got these characters a few years ago that were kind of like C-lister characters, and now they're like some of the most well-known Marvel characters ever, thanks to the movies. So I guess it's that kind of thing again. Are they throwing it, not like you said, because the IP's popular in a minute, but are they trying to maybe expand on it and give their iteration, which I'm sure they will, but... Yeah, I think it might be more of a design thing than anything, because I think a Justice League game would be great if it could be done right. I think the last Justice League game that was made... did you ever play Justice League Heroes on PS2? It was good.
I didn't.
It was very similar to like Marvel Ultimate Alliance, that kind of like
got.
style, but obviously with the Justice League in it. It was pretty good, but... Yeah, I'm curious to see what they'll do with this Suicide Squad. I hope it's good, and like you say, I hope we have to eat his words on it. But out of the two at the minute, Gotham Knights definitely has my vote for the one I want to see a bit more of.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think that the DC here, and we've discussed about this personally. I think the problem with adapting DC heroes particularly is that a lot of them are gods. Superman. He's effectively a god in all ways, shapes, and form. He's practically invulnerable, depending on which comic story you read. That changes. He has immense power levels, and I don't ever think flying will be easy to put into a video game. I think it will always be tricky, and then, like you say, you've got to make sure that there's some sort of stakes. What's nice about Batman is that he's ultimately just a dude in a well-armoured suit, and things could go bad very easily. The one thing I'm gutted about with Squad is that the end of Origins teased Deathstroke as potentially, setting up a Suicide Squad there. For me, that would have been the way to go. Would have been to explore very much the Black Ops idea of it, and to have a small team, and it would have been a more realistic take. And I think you would have had to have had. Maybe not more grounded heroes, but maybe slightly more grounded gameplay. From what we've seen from the trailer, you've got people zipping around all over the place, which, it could work, but Deathstroke is ultimately a sword in hand, gun in hand sort of character. I'm excited to see King Shark, though. There's a bit of a boom for King Shark at the minute.
Research rather going on with that character.
Yeah, I don't really know where it's come from. I'll be honest, because it's a weird ass character. I don't know if you know. This is just the stranger side while we're on the topic. In the animated movie Apocalypse War, it was revealed that John Constantine was banging King Shark at one point. Yeah, and it's just like, what the hell? Like, Constantine and Zatanna walking to somewhere, and King Shark stood with Harlot, and Constantine's like, "Oh, my ex is here," and Zatanna's like, "What? You went for that crazy bitch or something?" And he's like, "No," and it cuts to King Shark, just this creepy ass grin, man. Like, John Constantine's a weird, kinky warrior. Like, he went for the shot. It's like Shape of Water, the reverse.
So that's such a random factoid for them to throw in in an animated movie as well.
Yeah, man, proper weird out of nowhere. But who knows? I did my research. I did some questions.
Okay.
I had a question for you, which was, given that we're both fairly indifferent on Marvel's Avengers, and it seems like the world is fairly indifferent, particularly on the gameplay of Marvel's Avengers, where do you think the future is in adapting different comic characters? Like, we know Batman can be done, so we assume that Gotham Knights is going to be okay. We're going to see what Suicide Squad does. Where do you think the future is? Do you think there's a particular character? Do you think there's a particular style of game? Do you think Marvel are always going to be worse than DC, or do you think DC are going to drop the ball with some games? Where do you sort of see the future?
It's an interesting
going?
question, because I think as we kind of start the next generation of consoles, obviously developers and creative teams have a lot more to play with, so the limitations of what they can do with games are far beyond obviously what they've just dealt with the PS4 and the Xbox One and whatnot. So in that regard, there's a lot of things they could do, but in regards to particular characters, I'm not sure if there's anyone in particular that is kind of on people's lists to adapt. I mean, I think everybody who loves kind of comic book movies and comics in general and whatnot have their own favourite who they'd love to see in a game. But the problem with that is that character, when they adapt it, are they going to pull from other successes in the genre? Like you mentioned earlier with Spider-Man, the combat definitely pulls a lot from the Arkham series. And I think it's a difficult balance for developers to do a new IP and give it a sense of identity while also kind of not paying homage, but kind of respecting what's come before it within the genre. It's a hard one to predict, but like I've just said, it's odd that now the two major kind of superior IPs that we're seeing in the next generation of console, both DC and they're both co-op games. I know we've got Spider-Man Miles Morales on the way, but again, that's just more of an extension, if you will, of the main game. So it is odd to see that we're not getting one but two co-op games. So whether that's kind of the new movement, and we're going to see a lot more kind of multiplayer-based superhero games, that's something as well. Avengers as well, that fits into that category. But it's just the way they approach the service, because the service of the Avengers game is like a live service game where it's always being updated with content and stuff to buy, like Fortnite is, similar to like Destiny as well. Whereas you have stuff like Arkham and Spider-Man where it's a singular experience with story add-ons later. It's all down to interpretation and whether a developer has a fresh take on a character, but in that as well, how do you convince the owners of the IPs to not only let you use these characters but also fund it as well? Because games are hella expensive to make. How do you get somebody to convince you, like, hey, I want to make a single-player platformer about Daredevil, and like, yeah, he's popular, he's had his Netflix show, but how do I make that, A, not just the same as Batman, B, fresh, and C, fun to play? You've got all these different variables to do. I mean, I bet there's somebody out there in a creative team like, yeah, let's make the Weasel game.
Dude,
let's make the Weasel game
stuff,
for the PS5, and like, obviously that would probably never happen. But that's the thing as well. I bet there's ideas that are floated about for very smaller IPs and comic books out there, and have just not been successful. So it's just a lot of it is down to funding and obviously the marketability of it. But I'm sure there's stuff you'd like to see. I'd like to see like a Blade game at some point.
Well, I was just about to. You beat me there. I was just about to say you've got a minute to think of a game you'd like to see while I tell you one I'd like to see. Blade was one I considered. What I'd actually do, and I think it's partly due to the fact that we're unlikely to see the character in the MCU for a while, is I'd like to see an Iron Fist game. Because I think the nice thing about Iron Fist is it's effectively just a beat 'em up, right? But you can introduce the supernatural and comic elements. And I'd like to see them take from the Immortal Weapons run, which is the idea that there are there are different cities of heaven, and Kunlun is one of them. And they all put forward a champion, and it introduces previous Iron Fists, and it uses Davos, who's I can't think of his name. I can't think of his comic name. Is it the Steel Serpent, who's in the TV show? He's like one of the main villains. I just think that would be a complete flipping on its head. So it would be combat heavy, and it will always therefore be compared to the Arkham games and the combat style that they pretty much revolutionised. But I think it would be a nice way to use a character that is probably sat in the background at the minute, particularly on the main media front. Another one I'd like to see is Blade, man.
Blade would be
awesome.
In my head, I see
Arrow.
it as like kind of having the combat of Tsushima, because I think that's perfected like sword hand-to-hand combat in a very special way. Again, that pulls from other games, but they've kind of distinctly made it their own. But a Blade game would be awesome because you've got so much potential what you could do narratively with that. Like, he has connections with other characters like Ghost Rider that you could involve. You've got kind of the underworld aspect of it and the kind of mythical elements as well, of like vampire culture in itself that you see a bit of in the first movie with the blood rituals and whatnot. It's ripe for a video game, Blade.
So maybe Marvel could do a Marvel Knights game, because obviously there is a Marvel Knights team that's Punisher, Blade, Iron Fist. I think Doctor Strange features quite often. Ghost Rider. Is that a way that you could use some of the darker characters, or maybe some more of the B-list characters? Like, obviously we're seeing Blade in the MCU, that's coming, so it might be a good time to capitalise on that. But Ghost Rider, are we going to see a Ghost Rider in the MCU? So no, can we use that IP there? Because Ghost Rider's got pull, man. Nicolas Cage did bits.
I
People like Ghost Rider.
I actually have a lot of love for the second one.
Yeah, it's all right, man. And Ghost Rider's in the current Avengers run, and it's the Robbie Reyes iteration.
The one
Ghost
that they've been
Rider
using in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So the one with the car, and they introduced Cosmic Ghost Rider, which was a futuristic version of the Punisher, who was like Herald of Galactus and then Herald of Thanos, and like all sorts. And then they also had Johnny Blaze being King of Hell as well. So there's been quite a lot of Ghost Rider related material.
Game, like a co-op game. That's right.
Dude, I
That's
could see
right
it.
for gameplay. Like I said, you've got the underworld aspect of it. Oh.
Marvel, phone jump cut. Phone them. No, we will make this happen.
What do you see like the future of the genre as well? I've just said we've got co-op games. Do you think we're going to see that become a trend, or do you think there is still kind of room for your kind of traditional kind of single player games as well?
It's a cop-out answer, but I think it's both. And I think the reason is, for me, you will never replace that single player feeling. I sat and put hours, and Spider-Man, I platinumed it because I was that obsessed with the game. Arkham Asylum, I platinumed it. I think Arkham City, I got all the story trophies. I just couldn't be asked with all the challenge ones. I am absolutely obsessed with a good single player story. But then I think at the same time, video gaming is becoming, it sounds really weird to say, but it's becoming more accepted in culture.
I can agree with that.
People game more now than they ever have. And I mean, a lot of my friends have never gamed ever, but all of us are on Fortnite once a week grinding out challenges to get that Iron Man suit at the end of the battle pass, right? So I think there's always going to be a gap for easy to jump on games that you can play with your friends and chill out. At the same time, excuse me, I keep burping. At the same time, there's always going to be that gap for a real story-driven single-player game, like Spider-Man, like the Arkham games, that just sucks you in and leaves you wanting more and leaves you asking, when's the sequel? or makes you think, what are they going to do in the sequel, and really gets your head going outside of just playing the game. So it's a cop-out answer, but I think it is going to be both. I think there'll be a growth in co-op games, and I think there'll be a growth in co-op games just because microtransactions rule the world now.
But it's true.
And you can you can sell those more in a co-op online game where you can sell cosmetics and you can sell, new levels or whatever. And I don't know if DLC ever actually makes that much money, because a lot of games that release DLC win Game of the Year edition and it all gets packaged for cheap anyway at the end. So I think it will be both. But I'm excited for it either way. Is my
I think before
opinion.
we kind of close out, like I said, I'd come back to it earlier with Fortnite as well. It's kind of interesting, the kind of trajectory of that game, because it's gone from like a survival game to then like one of the biggest battle royale games in the world, and now it's kind of taken this new identity of being like the hub for different IPs to kind of tell not necessarily a story, but get people involved within those characters and exploring them, which I think is kind of unique and a new way to do things. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Dude, Fortnite's like the biggest marketing media in the world at the minute, right? Like, and it's so fresh. So a lot of people won't know this, but the Thor design in Fortnite is the Thor design from like the current run of comics. I think the Devourer King, like when you turn blue from the special emote, the Fortnite players will know this. That is when Thor is powered up by Galactus and gets the cosmic, the power cosmic. That's the one. The current Wolverine comic. I think Wolverine 5 came out last week. He gets teleported by the Fortnite rainbow in the last page of the comic, right? Yeah, like it's established. It's that Fortnite has got that much pull. Because its audience is huge, right? Because it's not just the people who play the game. It's the kids who watch it on YouTube and watch nothing but Fortnite on YouTube. My nephews are a perfect example. It's the people my age who that's their game that they play because they jump on and play with friends. They don't play anything else, but, do you want to jump on for a half hour? Yeah, let's do it. It's just become such a powerhouse. Marvel have done it now, but it was Aquaman not that long ago. And I think what the skins do is it's just a constant reminder that these companies are there, that Marvel are there. John Wick was, I think, the first. And dude, and you still see John Wicks to this day. There are hundreds of skins in the game, and you still see John Wicks to this day. I don't think I'll ever not play Thor. I might play Storm for a bit, just because she's my girl, but I think I'll have this Thor skin forever. But then you wonder, like, what's next? Like, are DC going to come back and have a full DC season rather
really
than just
fascinating. I know the game's like a bit of a meme in itself, but it is fascinating how it's become like a marketing hub for so many things. Like even the trailer like for Tenet was premiered inside of Fortnite, which is just wild within itself. I think it's absolutely fascinating how that's become not only just part of the superhero genre in a way as well, but just a hub for companies to kind of jump in there and market something. And I know it's kind of in a way a negative because it's kind of like using the kind of capitalist like consumerism aspect of games to the worst extent. Yeah. But again, it from an outsider point of view, it's such a fascinating way to do something.
Dude, the fact that I can become a god of thunder and then become an AI is dope. And I will fight anyone naked in the street that tells me otherwise.
I think I might have to play it. I haven't played Fortnite in a while. The last time I played it was when it was they put Aquaman into it.
Dude, we'll jump on, man. We'll jump on one night next week.
I think that about wraps it up. But before we go, just a little bit of admin. So if you support our Patreon, not only do you get cool things like every issue of Jump Cut magazine for free, exclusive podcasts and interviews, and a whole lot of other good stuff, you also get a shout out on Jumpcast and on Playcast. So I'd like to extend thank yous to Chris Wilson, Let There Be Light Productions, Zoe Baines, Darryl Griffiths, Sam Luck, Ola Smith, Peter Hodgkins, Andy Meakin, Fabiana Rossas, Hamish Calvert, and Chris Murphy. We appreciate your support, and if you want to become a Patreon, you can do so by going to jumpcutonline.co.uk. But before we go, do you have anything you'd like to plug, Rob?
you know what? I would like to just say it's been great to be on. I love, Sam. I will support you to the end of time. You're my boy. Love being on. Hopefully be on again at some point. Get at me. Anything comic related, get at me.
Hopefully we'll get John on as well next time.
Oh, absolutely, man. Oh, yeah, let's shout out John. There we go. I'll do that one.
But yeah,
man.
That's about it. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. We'll be back again in another fortnight with a new episode. But for now, stay safe and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.